Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on Fat Burning Man, where we help you look, feel, and perform at your best. Could giving up food for 24 hours or more actually improve your performance? Recent guests of Fat Burning Man like Dr. David Perlmutter, Tim Ferriss, and many others have explored the many benefits of intermittent fasting on this show. If you read my book, The Wild Diet, you know that I've been fasting and feasting for years, which generally looks like an eating window of 16 hours of fasting, then around 8 of eating. It's a pattern of under-eating during the day, generally speaking, and enjoying luxurious feasts for dinner and most definitely after workouts. Today, we're back with CrossFit rock star, our friend Dr. Kelly Starrett, to bring it all home. Kelly, of course, is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Becoming a Supple Leopard, and creator of MobilityWOD. He travels the world teaching elite Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard forces, athletes from the NFL, NBA, NHL, and MLB, and world-ranked strength and power athletes. He consults with Olympic teams and universities and is a featured speaker at strength and conditioning conferences worldwide. It's truly an honor to have Kelly back on the show. Now, before we get to the show, here's a bit of fun news that just came in. As loyal listeners know, my first career was actually as a musician. When I was a chubby little 8-year-old, I wore suspenders to my first gig, playing clarinet at the local diner. But last year, I recorded an album of original music with Mr. Denny Hemmingson, who's a past guest on this show. You may remember him, but he's also the band leader of the Tim McGraw Band, so you know he's got some chops. We just got a letter from the Songwriters Association of Washington, and this week, the Songwriters Association selected the title track of our album, Swamp Thing, as a finalist in the Roots Rock Americana category at the Mask Awards. And then another track, Thank God for the Blues, which was the final track on the album, in the Jazz and Blues category, as well as winner in the R&B category of the 17th annual Great American Song Contest, and then awarded Outstanding Achievement in Songwriting. The music industry, as many people know these days, is gross, so we decided to make our music completely independently, and that means we did it for the sake of art itself. In fact, Thank God for the Blues, we pretty much wrote in the studio as we were recording it there in Nashville. So to all of you out there, I just want to thank you for all of your support over the years. If you're wondering what my music sounds like, here's a little known fact. Since I'm way too cheap to license music for this show and podcast, I wrote and recorded every song you've heard on this show for the past 5+ years. You can hear me sing and play guitar, saxophone, keys, and even a little bit of clarinet in the background. Yes, indeed, there will be much more to come. If you'd like to check out the jams, you can watch my music videos for free on the Abel James YouTube channel. Just make sure you subscribe while you're there. Just click that little subscribe button. It really helps. You can also listen to our award-winning album Swamp Thing on iTunes, Spotify, CD Baby, and more by searching for Abel James and Swamp Thing. And if you want the easiest way to watch our music videos and listen to the tunes, just type in swampthingmusic.com. And as always, abeljames.com and fatburningman.com. You can eventually find your way there. Now, here's a bit of information from our community, the Fat Burning Tribe. This one is from Patty. She says, I'm 8 weeks post-op from total hip replacement surgery. I feel great. I'm way more mobile and pain-free than I have been in years. I rid myself of 35 pounds and 15 inches by way of the Wild Diet before surgery and have continued with it since February 1st of 2016, making it how I live always. Now I can add exercise since my hip is so much better. I go to physical therapy once a week and they are amazed by my progress. I do my PT exercises at home, but I've also started walking my 2 yellow labs again 40 minutes each morning. I feel good. I'm healing well. I do believe I owe much of my progress to the wild lifestyle. Thank you, Abel, Allison, and the Fat Burning Tribe for your support and encouragement. Catch me if you can. Patty, you're the best. We're so happy for you. As a loyal owner of a yellow lab myself, sometimes I definitely realize when I'm out there, whether I'm groggy and it's early in the morning or I'm a little bit wired and tired at the end of the day, especially after a stressful long day, I realize that my dog is really taking me on a walk. So yellow labs are great, by the way, highly recommended. But if you don't have a dog, pretend that you do. Make sure that you're going on those 2 walks a day. Quick tip. And by the way, our new 30-day meal plans are ready in the Fat Burning Tribe, and they include chicken tikka masala, wild buffalo wings, cookie dough truffle fat bombs, homemade skillet pizza, chocolate dipped strawberries, pulled pork, chicken pad thai, and even peanut butter cookies. Right now, you can join us for a huge discount for your first month and get our complete done-for-you meal plans with color photos, easy step-by-step instructions, cooking classes with me and my wife, Allison, and more to help you burn the fat this year with minimal exercise. Just 100% real food, and it's all planned out for you. Just head on over to fatburningtribe.com to join. Once again, from any device, just type in fatburningtribe.com. Can't wait to meet you in the tribe. On to the show with Kelly. You're about to learn the surprising results of going without food for 2 to 3 days, how to get results with breathwork, how to move like a human, why I deadlift my dog, and much more. Let's go hang out with Kelly. All right, folks, Dr. Kelly Starrett is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Becoming a Supple Leopard, which has revolutionized how coaches, athletes, and everyday humans approach movement and athletic performance. He travels the world teaching elite Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard forces, athletes from the NFL, NBA, NHL, and MLB, and world-ranked strength and power athletes. He consults with Olympic teams and universities and is a featured speaker at strength and conditioning conferences worldwide. In the CrossFit community, K-Star is a bona fide celebrity. He's a way bigger deal than Justin Bieber. I can't believe you're here, Kelly. Thank you so much for coming back on the show, man.
Well, I don't know about the Justin Bieber part, but certainly the believers who are Supple Leopards also squat better than any of Justin's fans, so I'll take it. Every
time, 100%. Now, I do squats holding up my 80-pound dog. Is that right? Is that the right form?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things we have at the gym here is on Wednesdays I coach this thing called Kelly's Performance Lab.
Yeah.
And really it's a way of me working out problems or coaching or seeing solutions. And so I literally have this stoic group of about 20 people who come in and I just experiment on them and they are up for it. And It is brutal. But last week we did horrible front squats from the bottom position, trying to reconcile sort of our worst position, most compromised position with developing force and stability there, which is picking up your dog. You know, and it's interesting. A lot of us only ever squat from the top down, and we rarely squat from the bottom up. But that's really the squatting we do most of the time in the world.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to know. Now, what is something that, and I'm sure we could go anywhere with this, but what's something that for people who are out there listening, whether they're CrossFit coaches or just regular Joes and Janes, what are they doing wrong right now or in general in their lives?
Well, that's, I tell you, let's rephrase that, because people are working harder, I think, than they've ever worked before. Yeah. I think our movement practices are better than they have and more complete. Mm-hmm. If you look at what's happening with Strong First, if you look at what's happening in the Olympic lifting community, the CrossFit communities, even places like Barry's Boot Camp, we're starting to see a much more rounded out movement practice. That means, and define that as, hey, you're taking the shoulder into all the positions that make the benchmarks and bookmarks of what human function should do, right? You've got all the languages of the spine, you're squatting at full depth. So we're seeing that the rounding out, we're all coming towards the same sets of issues or same sets of positional competencies. How we arrive there is differently. The thing that we're doing I think a poor job of now, because we've really seen people radically clean up their diets, is that we are forgetting why we were in the gym in the first place. And I think that is about getting outside and acquiring new skills and existing in chaotic environments. We see is, and I just get a little talk about sort of athletic development, and what we see is that we've told for kids for a long time, if you just play a lot of sports, that's enough. And truly what we're trying to do is expose kids to a lot of chaotic environments, make them come up with novel motor solutions. But that in and of itself we know is an incomplete practice, and we have to have some form of movement training for this ultimate development. So what's happened is we've seen people shift away from, they're not playing flag football, they're not playing pickup basketball, they're not skiing and running and biking and climbing and doing all the things they should do, being multi-sport athletes. Instead, we've seen an artifact of things that look and only exist in the gym.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is that is a satisfying practice, but the real application is getting out. And that means that we need to make sure we are learning new skills regularly and playing. And the play is the heart and soul of the matter. So, at some point, if we don't dissociate fitnessing from training, we're going to see that we can work really hard and not become better skilled movers and have a set of skills that don't transfer towards carrying a heavy pack for 20K, or, something like that. And I think, if you look at a lot of programs, they're requiring you to spend 2 to 4 hours a day in the gym. And I'm like, that's untenable. And so it doesn't scale, it's untenable, and it doesn't necessarily transfer to the sport. What we need to do is make sure that while we're training, we're not just working hard and fitnessing, because I think a lot of what we've seen in strength and conditioning fitness community is that it looks like modern day bodybuilding. It's all about the ego. Take your shirt off. Sure. It's your selfie. And it's not about the application of that towards something else. And again, I think sometimes it gets confusing because gymnastics is a sport, Olympic lifting is a sport, and powerlifting is a sport. But we've forgotten why we're using those tenets to become better volleyball players, become better skills. And I think that, coupled with the fact that we are doing a pretty bad job of down-regulating, and we're continuing to refine our skills and not identify our success by, do we add another pound to the plate, to the bar or not, or I did one more pull-up. Those are important metrics, of course, but it doesn't tell me about the quality of what's happening. And we need to continue to put breathing practice, down-regulation practice, so that this is all really sustainable and goes beyond just, becoming a huge jacked athlete who can no longer run or swim.
Right. That's the most tragic thing, right? You see these people who are so accomplished in this one particular area, and they're at the top of their game. Then all of a sudden they might get injured, lose interest. All of a sudden they're not the best anymore, and then that's the end of their career.
This is human beings as being human beings for as long as there have been human beings. We've been struggling, and you do pay a price for be a specialist. One of my friends is he's a good mate, and he's been on the podium of the Tour de France. And, we're rebuilding his squat so he's more efficient on the bike now. And, you don't get something for nothing. So, and it's okay. It's okay to specialize and make those compromises, but that's not what most of us are doing. Most of us need to be ready for sport and life. And, one of the things that I think I'm really heartened by is that we're seeing a shift now. And I think this is completely reasonable that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we saw people had big aerobic engines, but they were weak and poorly skilled. And now we're seeing that people are much, much stronger. I mean, it's like brutally strong. It's amazing to see what people can do. And they've become much more skilled, but now we've lost sight of the aerobic engine. And now people are having to go back and pick up that, base aerobic work, which isn't junk mileage, mind you. It's not just mindless 5Ks, but really being a little bit more skilled and putting energy back into developing that practice. And, it turns out Dr. Andy Galpin, you've seen him on the internet waves and stuff. Sure. There's a good study that came out that one of the key metrics of longevity is VO2 max. And so it's not your ability to, suffer under a bar for a set of 20. That's important, vitally important, but your ability to go out and actually blow out the carburetor. And so we'll all get there. And it's okay to have different interests, but I just want to remind people that the point of all this is to get the hell out and go be a human being.
Yeah. Has that changed, over the years, what you're doing day to day? Are you always changing it up and evolving, or what have you learned personally?
What's interesting is that, some time for my wife and I we started to free up a couple of years ago, and I went back I was a professional paddler for a long time, and I've been paddling nonstop since I was about 12. I think I got in the boat for the first time, so I'm in my 32nd year of boating. Wow. But I went back and I paddled the Molokai and I started racing outrigger again. And what that demanded was that I was really competent at an hour plus at aerobic. And, and the last Molokai race I did took me over 6 hours. And I was in a boat that was a little small, but and it was kind of flat. So it's a 6 hour, aerobic effort without stopping. Yeah. And that's short compared to what some of our friends are doing. But my point is that what I realized when I'd come back to it is I was, there is a point where you are too big. There is a point when you are too strong. I just don't need to deadlift 600 pounds anymore. If I can check the box on 500, sure. And it doesn't mean I don't deadlift heavy once a week. Yeah. I deadlift heavy to make my back work and my hips work well. But, or I'll throw the Dan John, hey, I'll throw 315 on the bar and deadlift it every 30 seconds for, 20 or 30 minutes, Texas cardio. But the idea here is that I literally am now, the biggest aerobic athlete in the world, and 4 days a week I am suffering. Brian McKenzie of Power Speed Endurance does my aerobic programming. Okay. His wife, Erin Cafaro. Yeah. And I live off a spreadsheet. And there's a couple things that I think that are really notable about my own practice. And one is that it took me over a year to re-find my aerobic legs. And this doesn't mean I wasn't fit, but to make the changes. And now I'm almost, 2 years into this aerobic experience. And I can tell you, I have doubled my aerobic capacity at least. I mean, my ability to suffer has gone through the roof, coupled with, and it opened up a whole bunch of interesting doors about breathing and efficiency. And it made me a much better all-around athlete.
Yeah.
The things that I could do, the volume I could handle. And I realized that, maybe I was still always well-conditioned athlete, but I didn't have this aerobic base. I'd taken my eye off that. The other, I think piece around, was digging out of that hole a little bit is realizing, well, how much do I need to front squat to make everything work? I mean, I weighed 236. Last time I got into the body fat sink tank, the dunk tank, I was, 7% body fat. And I was like, well, okay, I'm 43. That's good enough. I like to drink a glass of wine once in a while.
Sure.
I'll sneak a cookie. So I'm not going to ever be super shredded. But I was like, yeah, I'm under 10. I'm good. But what I realized was that when I started living off the spreadsheet and had some goals, when I actually was forcing myself to compete again, saying I have a big race, I really paid attention to my sleep density. I paid attention to my ability to recover. All the details came on board. So being much more interested in this aerobic engine, figuring out how much of the strength training I could pull back.
Yeah.
I still bench or press heavy once a week. I still check in the boxes for being a strength athlete, but my focus has really shifted. And then really making sure that I understood that the things that we were recommending to our athletes, we had to do because I'm living off a spreadsheet and I literally can't hit my numbers if I'm hypohydrated, I'm not poorly fed. And I think that's one of the mistakes around fitnessing sometimes is that you can drink a bottle of wine and not have any sleep, and you can still go smash it at the gym for 12 to 14 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But you can't do that and see the gains, especially as the aerobic conditioning comes up, as the pounds, you have to pull back on that stuff. And that's why it's important to have something that you challenge yourself. And here's a good example. Go do a Spartan race. Just do the sprint and tell me how'd you do? That's just a 5-mile run with some obstacles. You should be able to nail that. You know?
But it's amazing how many people can't.
Yeah, or are surprised to realize that they're, the 400s that they run once in a while aren't enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. And so what's really interesting is that this is one about reaffirming the concept that we can never become too skilled, right? That skill is an infinite capacity. But ultimately fitness is a cup that fills over, right? Fitnessing. I don't know how many mountain climbers it takes, but just at some point there's enough, right?
Yeah.
100 burpees, like, okay, well, let's have an more interesting conversation. But, I think, when we're one is developing better skill, and the second one is trying to be more conscious about our own practice.
Yeah.
And however we get there, I think that there's a lot of information to be had that then translates to how I handle stress, how I handle these other things. I'll give you an example. One of the things that's changed in my life in the last 2 years is I started hanging out with this guy named Laird Hamilton a bunch, and I met him through Brian McKenzie, who was one of his partners. And Laird had developed a breathing practice and modified breathing practice from a guy named Wim Hof, who was all over the internet, right?
Yeah, I just did some of that this morning.
It's great. So I don't do Wim Hof stuff, but I have a breathing practice now every day.
Yeah.
And my wife, I've been ice bathing. I've been in the ice just about every day for the last 2 years.
2 years?
And
Wow.
2 years I've been doing this. And what I can tell you is that the things that I've learned about myself, the things that I have, the consciousness shifts, the awareness, the ability to assess my ready state, handle cold. That's what's really interesting is we make this about an intellectual conversation, and adding in some of these other practices really makes it that I feel like I'm a much more mellow guy, that I can handle stress better, and it translates to all the other aspects of my life. And that's really what we were supposed to be doing in the sport anyway, using sport not just for nutrition, using training not just as nutritive experiences, but as gateway to self-understanding. And that sounds airy-fairy, but that's why we should be squatting heavy, to find out who we are.
Yeah, well, that is the why, and I think that's why so many people get in trouble when they they kind of reach the pinnacle, and especially once they start to waver a little bit. They're up at the top, and then it's like, why am I doing this again? Right? You punish yourself for years on end, and
and that's it's interesting. We have a friend named Chuck Glenn who is one of the best stand-up paddlers on the planet. He's an all-around waterman. He's a designer for Laird's boards. I mean, he's one of my favorite paddlers. And he just went down representing USA for this big Fiji paddle, and on his way down, his board got crashed, and he couldn't repair it, and he had to borrow a board. Wow. And so there he is at this huge international event representing USA, and his design, his board, and he is really fast on that, broken. So he has to borrow another board, and that puts him wrong board, wrong conditions, wrong thing, doesn't understand. You know what I mean? But instead, he goes through the experience, and it challenges us not to have everything perfect every single time, because I think one of the things we've seen is that now we get into the gym and we have our pre-WOD, and I have my knee sleeves and my little band and my little and then I do my little routine, and it's like step aerobics that I all know all the steps for, and that's seriously, that consistency is important. But when my wife and I, when we did the Spartan race like a month ago or something, one of the things we said was, hey, let's not carry water. We'll drink whatever we find out there. Let's not take a snack, and let's just deal. I mean, we were well fed and well rested and well prepared, but that was a 2-hour race, and I had 3 Dixie cups of water this much, and of course that's not my best effort. Yeah. In it, but what was so great was being unprecious about it. That it's okay. It's okay to be hungry, because what am I training for? Like, I'm like, hey, Juliet, one of the things we did in the last year, we started fasting once a month. We go for a 24 to 36 hour cycle. Okay. And again, I don't fast around competition. I don't fast around, but I had never gone 24 hours without eating until about 6 months ago.
Wow. How'd you find it?
Just because friends were tinkering with it. And one of the ways that we got into it was we've been toying with some friends who have these genetic testing companies. So understanding sort of the genomic possibility of your body, right? What the potentials are, what your roadmap doesn't. Of course, it's not genetic determinism at all, but it turns out one of the things that I have a weakness in is fat utilization. I do not utilize fat very well, and that's a genetic problem. So there's 2 ways of sort of addressing that. One is that I eat a standard athletic diet, so I eat enough carbohydrate to fuel my athletic self. Sure. But I guarantee you, if you add too much coconut water, coconut oil, or MCTs or fat to my coffee, I'm going to get diarrhea. Boom, diarrhea. And it's not that I can't absorb the fat. I mean, I've tinkered, but it turns out I just don't process that. And so it's actually a hole in my armor when I'm in the endurance capacity, because I don't have access to these fatty acids. Yeah. So there's one is that I either train to it and think, okay, well, I just have to make sure that I have the right carbohydrate on board, and we have those tools, or I really try to lean on the availability of the system. So if I've got 10%, let's not make sure I'm getting 5% of that 10%. Let's make sure that I've got 10%. And it turns out that, that fasting is a way of, a 36-hour fast is a way of really clicking on some of that fat adaptation machinery without having to suffer for 2 or 3 weeks. Right. And so that was one of the entrees in. And also I was like, Juliet, I don't know the last time I just chose not to eat, because I'm not hungry sometimes, Yeah. And it turns out it was easy to do that, because I'm not out of balance and I don't have cravings. And, at 36 hours though, I mean, I woke up in the middle of the night and ate a chicken, at 36 hours, like my body was like, let's go. But I think that's what's interesting about this, is continuing to refine our own practices and our understanding of skill, because, and we hear about these things. I was listening to an interview about one of the world's best climbers. And, he, as a kid, he and his brother would go out and climb for 2 days without eating, just to see how tough they were. They were Austrians. And then one of my friends, Jimmy Chin, who is an amazing climber, and if you haven't seen his documentary, Meru, M-E-R-U, I highly recommend that, because I think what ends up happening is we come to consider ourselves very tough because we can suffer in the gym and then I go have my post-protein, Yeah. But Jimmy was on the rock with Conrad Anker and another climber, and they try to make this successful attempt of this summit, and they get turned away about 100 meters from the top. But what people don't know is that they had run out of food, and they had 2 days of down climbing after they're out of food. So each of them had a third of a power bar a day, and they have to down climb. They're like 20,000 feet and 22,000 feet, and so they're doing this high altitude climbing on no food. Right. And that's the reality. They get to the bottom, They go to find their food cache, but because the reason they got run out of food was the snows, they can't find their food, so they have another 24-hour walk to get back to food.
Wow.
So, and the choice is, I'm going to do that or not do that. And what I really appreciate about that is that that's a non-issue for them. They're like, this is the way it is. I'm not going to be precious about it. I still have to accomplish this. And I think that's made me a lot more comfortable with, hey, it's okay to go for a long hike, right, and not be fed every 18 minutes, And again, some of this is consciousness, and it's nice to be able to dial that in for a race, but also to sort of let go and enjoy the experience of this corporeal, thing.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that the pendulum is swinging from like way too much of everything back to like less of everything, simplicity. And I know that
I don't think it's less. I think it's more refined. Like, show me, that you can be a human being and really functional. And I appreciate, Laird is really reasonable. He eats like a ninja. His heart rate, he did a little step test, and I think he only got his heart rate up to 200 at age 50. Wow. I don't know the last time, he's just a beast. But he's like, look, if you eat a hamburger and your knuckles swell up and you get diarrhea, he's like, you're also just as big a liability. If you bulk, you're a liability. So work those things out. Expand our definition of why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah. And for me, that's about consistency.
Right. About consistency and trying those new things. I know that for me with with fasting, that was it. I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years now in various ways, and it taught me so much about meditation and about like how to work on business issues and emotional issues I was going through. The idea that you can just put up with whatever the world throws at you or doesn't throw at you is a really a powerful thing. And also I found that with breathing as well. If you can get better at holding your breath, then all of a sudden when you're out of breath doing sprints or a workout or something like that, you're like, oh, I know what this is like. I know this state. I can deal with this, and I'm going to relax into it. And that's a really powerful skill.
Yeah, and these things serve us on so many different levels. My daughter is 11, and she gets in the ice water every day with us.
Does she really?
Yeah, and wow. But her breathing, it's her breathing that we talk about. We don't talk about time. We talk about, hey, try to get 20 breaths or 30 breaths. And it's about her being able to control that. And what I really feel is exciting is that we're finally being able to sync up sort of our modern sensibilities and deep understanding of strength and conditioning principles with the movement traditions of the past. And Iyengar, that guy is a genius, and said something like, oh, I don't know, the breath is the king of the brain, and the nerves are the king of the breath. So what are the ways in that ice water, that stress, that that breathing practice? You can see how that is rudimentary and why good strength and conditioning always centers around the spine. That breathing in yoga, breathing in Pilates, breathing in dance, and that you're seeing, we've come back and we've been able to integrate these things that didn't feel like they were important to us in our strength and conditioning performance world. It turns out they really are, and we can wrap our modern sensibilities around them and incorporate them in a way that, again, respects the time of the person. Because I think the easy dart at all this is, when do I do this? I have 2 kids and a job, and and I, my wife and I are like, meal prep? What are you talking about? And like this morning for salad, for breakfast we were like, boom, Trader Joe's prepackaged salad and scrambled eggs, and we're like, dude, meal prep,
quick and dirty.
And that's right. And but the idea here is we need to show people what a 24-hour cycle looks like. And here's an example. We, as part of our Stand Up Kids initiative, we have, which we've been working on, and if you're on the web or seen us, our daughters are the first all-standing fidget desk in the world, moving desk. So there's no more sitting. There's a lot of movement. The desk is involved. And we have about 35,000 kids now around the United States, mostly at poverty schools because of our project Standing.
35,000.
We've seen the research saying that really switching kids from sitting desks to moving desks is a silver bullet for obesity. Literally, we can wipe out obesity. We can reverse body mass index. Why? Because people are moving, right? It's not about sitting and standing. It's about moving or not moving. But one of the things we did this year is we started a walking school bus in our neighborhood. So we walk, and we have about 40 kids. Parents drop off. Some parents walk. We walk about 1.5 miles to school and then 1 mile back, or 1.25 miles. And so many adults there came up to us after a couple months. They're like, I've lost 10 pounds.
Wow.
Like my sex life is better.
Yeah.
I sleep better. And I'm like, because you walk your kids to school? Like that is really messed up. I mean, how far away from center were you that
Sure.
a 2-mile walk a day has such a profound change on your experience? And that's one of those ways where it's easy to integrate those practices in so that you're not feeling like you're plugging and playing, that you're not, I always use the example like, hey, I take this turmeric at 2 a.m. I do this special secret school program.
Yeah.
It's consistency. And that's why you can see guys like Dan John and Pavel have been saying, hey, keep a kettlebell in your garage. And if you're toast, well, go walk and then make sure you get 100 kettlebell swings a day. Show me you can be consistent.
Yeah.
Then we can talk about being heroic.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Because it's really easy for people to be attracted to that new sexy thing or that new routine or whatever, but you got to keep it. You have to follow it.
That's right. And and I think one of the nice things is when we wrap all of this conversation in the mantle of performance, it gives us a chance to make sure that people experience the outcome. And one of the things, especially as a physical therapist, is that we see adherence as a dirty, dirty word in the physical therapy, language.
Sure.
And I think one of the reasons that people aren't adherent is that what they're doing doesn't work. They can't experience it. They can't more closely conjoin behaviors with outcomes.
Yep.
And one of the nice things about tightening up that control loop is that people see an outcome, they experience positive change, and they can see it right away, and then the behavior exists, right? If you're telling me that I have to eat an avocado a day for the next 2 years before it's going to be really difficult for me to stick that avocado a day diet,
Yeah.
So, I think we've done a better job of showing people the interrelation between that and respecting the fact that human beings are such a complex system that, sometimes dysfunction doesn't express itself until decades later. And I think that also makes it more difficult. So here's an example. There's very few research pieces that show that posture dysfunction causes pain. And the problem with that language is saying that I'm waiting around for pain. But poor posture, poor organized spine, poor reference organization of your central nervous system expresses itself in downregulation of function. So you suddenly, it doesn't matter. Yeah, you may not, your back and neck may not hurt, but you definitely won't be able to take a full breath. You definitely won't be able to put your arms over your head, right? You'll definitely won't be able to deadlift heavy.
Right.
And I think then suddenly people are like, oh, I care, because when I improve that, I moved to these standing fidget desks, then I was able to see X immediately. And that's where we're starting to really get the behavior changes.
Yeah, I was really fortunate because I grew up being like a trained musician and singer, and you learn in that. And also I have a deep voice, so when I did like performances in theater and stuff like that, you couldn't hear me unless I projected and learned how to really do it. And that all came from the correct posture, the correct breath, because if you try to do it in the wrong, as you know, in the wrong way, it just doesn't work. And you're going to be slapped by the teacher or whatever. You have to learn that.
And that's what's great about where we are in the internet, and is that we're finally being able to reconcile and see how these systems unify. That hey, the mechanics of breathing and singing are the mechanics of swimming and breathing. And how they unify. And so because look, 12,000 years ago, we were not the only species of animal of human being on the planet, right? But in the last 10,000 years, here's what's changed about you: nothing. And so it's not like I have a different set of organized shoulders for swimming than I do for throwing. It's the shoulder. And I think we're finally getting to the point where we're understanding the root function, and that ultimately all of these movement practices, all of these expressions of the shoulder are best techniques that utilize the physiology. So it's rare that you see a sustainable practice where the shoulder's in a terrible position and neck is broken, and that's what we're teaching. And that you're seeing is that once you can start to connect the dots, when you jump into a yoga class, you're like, oh, I understand. You go to an Olympic lifting class, you're like, it's the same shape as my yoga class. When you're talking about blocking the ball at the net, it's the same principles as overhead squatting. And suddenly you're like, okay, I can understand now why formal training in these root positions, teaching people to breathe, teaching people down regulation, then gives them the nascent framework to be able to apply the skill on top of it.
Yeah. So is this new, or is this something where, these positions, are they something that are kind of built into us that we need to remember, or is this more cutting edge stuff?
Well, I would say that for the first time in our lives, we've been able to nail down and say what they are.
Yeah.
But it's very, very old, and I think it's really arrogant of us to say that people hadn't figured it out before.
Right.
And so, when you're sitting in lotus, your shoulders are in the externally rotated positions. That if you literally went from hands on your lap to grabbing a couple rings, you'd be in the finished position of the dip, the top, where the hands are out, right? That fully externally rotating the hip, mechanically, not actively, just passively externally rotating the hip when you're sitting in lotus position, winds up the hip capsule, which makes your pelvis stable, so that you can then stack your rib cage on top of your pelvis, and then you can breathe more efficiently with less work because the structure is supporting it. And if you don't have that, your legs are gonna burn out, your back burns out, right? You fatigue in those positions. One of my friends is a super nerd, and he'll send me a picture of so, his wife is a professor of art, and he'd be like, Kelly, look at this. This is from like 900 AD. And it's a Chinese sculpture of like, some kind of monster holding a lantern. And the guy's in the perfect front rack shape, and the head is neutral. And then the other hand is out in a fist. And you're like, oh, maybe someone was paying attention.
Yeah.
And we're just reconnecting the dots, and then also figuring out how that works in a way that is replicable. And I don't know. I just heard this piece on NPR. Maybe it was Science Friday, that basically we have seen the continued refinement of human function for the last several centuries. That the fastest. Like, to qualify for the Boston Marathon today would have gotten you like fourth in the marathon, like in 1906, just to qualify, right?
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is that people are building, and some of that's really remarkable. So like when Thor Hafeld walks the mast 4 steps. Well, 3,000 years ago, a guy walked the mast 3 steps. So some of the increment is small, but I think we've been obsessed with being human beings, and also people have been obsessed with improving the human condition for as long as they've been humans. So suddenly you're going to the Ayurvedic traditions, and you're like, okay, let me not throw this out as non science based, but let's say, what were they trying to solve? What are the root pieces around this? And you can start to view this with, people were really clever. Here's another example. When we were in Korea teaching, we were in this very traditional part of the Koreatown in Seoul, and there was a woman who had a pile of bones and horns on the table that were shaped into like shark fins and stuff.
Wow.
I walked right up and I started scraping myself with those, and this woman lit up at the big white guy.
Yeah.
And she's all of a sudden is scraping my neck and scraping my arms, and and those were gua sha tools that they were just selling on the street. So like, you're like, oh, hey, could you pick me up, hon? So I mean, like, I bought a bunch of these like indigenous bone, and the feel was really great. And here's this idea of like instrumented tooling, which is around the internet now, and everyone is scraping themselves.
Sure.
But that is old school, right?
That's cool.
Yeah, and I think that's what's fun now is we're being able to bring up what we think are primary practices. And that means that once again we're moving towards simplicity. That what we're trying to do is say, hey, what are the foundational principles of being a human being? Sleeping, stress regulation, play. Right? You got to be strong. You got to breathe hard. Right? And now those things we can argue about and tune up and tune down to degree, but those are the building blocks of good human function.
Yeah, exactly. So how does that, knowing everything that how does that trickle down to the way that you raise your kids?
Well, that's a really great question. And once again, it's consistency. I have 2, they are really good kids. They're such good girls. And we don't think it's us. We think it's the fact that, they eat food. And we're not fascist and controlling, because we have daughters. We don't want to try to create some kind of paleo eating dysfunction.
Right.
My oldest daughter actually self-identified as, she's like, hey, when I eat pasta, at a friend's house, I get diarrhea. When I eat pizza, I vomit.
Yeah.
And so she just pulled out the gluten, and all of a sudden, that was one of those things. So our kids eat food. We don't stress. We eat high quality food. We not huge dessert. We treat dessert like a special treat. But I will tell you that our kids sleep like ninjas.
Yeah.
They are in bed at 8 or 8:30 every single night and sleep till 6 or 6:30, and and we are consistent about that. And so by setting up basic principles, our kids have blackout shades in their room. We try to get to be active. What ends up happening is that the principles end up being there. and then we just sort of, create it as a context so that our kids can start to model those behaviors over time. Now my oldest daughter will be like, she'll choose the salad because she really likes salad, and she's an athlete. And so it's not like she's a big strong ass and, can front squat. As an 11-year-old, they're like, damn. But we have a slack line in our yard and the cold tub, and all her aunts train, and the whole neighborhood comes to our house in the morning and basically exercises at the Starrett Home Health Center.
Wow.
And that's just noise. So I think what we really try to do, like one of the things my wife and I feel strongly about is like, the older we've gotten, we don't drink. We just don't drink much.
Yeah.
And, if we do drink, it's and drink, because we feel terrible the next day. And most of the elite athletes I know have all stopped drinking. Laird Hamilton doesn't drink. Levi Leipheimer doesn't drink. They just don't drink. And what's interesting is that we work with a company called Whoop, W-H-O-P, which makes a tracking device that looks at heart rate variability and things while you sleep, which is really great. So it can capture some important data while you're sleeping, and then you don't have to wear it the rest of the time. But when they saw that, when they were with their elite athletes, that when they showed them the correlation between cardiac function and drinking, they saw a decrease in alcohol consumption of 80%, because those athletes were like, holy crap, 4 days later, my cardiac function still hasn't recovered because that alcohol is so neurotoxic.
Right.
That they saw a decrease in caffeine by 44%. That those athletes were in bed 40%, 42 minutes on average more, because they could see, and again, that's that thing, we can conjoin the outcome with the behavior. And so once then you're like, well, shoot, maybe I'll have a Mexican beer, right? Yeah. And then I'm done.
Right.
And and then that didn't mess up my sleep, et cetera, et cetera. So we just need to become more conscious. But when we model those behaviors for our kids don't see us drink a lot. We're just not a big deal. We like, it's this much wine and that's all there is. We see those as food. And so our kids now have this relationship with alcohol. They're like, well, it's not really that important because my parents don't value it. My parents eat a lot of vegetables, so I eat a lot of vegetables. My parents sleep and put a premium on sleep. But I think that's the thing that we're interested in. What I will tell you unequivocally about the world that we live in is that Juliet and I have zero aspirations for our kids to be professional athletes. We don't think that is a goal. I don't even know if I want them to play in college.
Yeah.
I want them to be interested in the world and to be really good at sports, and they surf and they ski and they bike and we do as many skills as we can, lifestyle skills, and we still, we'll be on swim team or, on volleyball. We still play those formal things, but we're trying to set it up so that our kids are excited about being physical animals their whole life and don't see that as the fetishization of sport and loss of love to move. So that's how we have tried not to mess up our kids, but I'm sure we will.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a beautiful thing. I know I can vouch for the fact that it is monkey see, monkey do. Whatever people say, whatever the psychologists say about like how to raise your kids and what happens and whatever, what they see you do, they will do without even knowing it subconsciously. And I know that I became like an okay short order cook when I was young, and then later on worked in restaurants and got really involved with food because that's exactly what my dad did. And when we didn't have ketchup, we lived in the boondocks in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire, he would make it. And we didn't have cocktail sauce, he'd make that too. He'd just figure out a way to put stuff together. And that is so inspiring. I didn't know it at all at the time, but that is so inspiring to see.
Yeah.
And it does trickle down.
We love to cook. Georgia now is a pretty good cook. And she's actually starting a subscription bakery service with one of her friends because they really like to cook. And cooking is a thing that everyone does. And agree, and there are some things you can control as a parent. One of the principles of being a human being is that you should be wearing flat shoes all the time. Mm-hmm. And if you want to make a choice about adding some heel later on in the day for your sport, fine. That's an adult decision. But you buy your kids shoes. So if you want to not mess up your kid, make sure, A, that they are barefoot as much time as you can, and B, that they are wearing Vans or Cons or, or something flat. And if they're not, that's your fault, not theirs.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this, because this kind of dovetails to the whole kids thing, because it's really the next generation that's coming up in a completely different time. Things are changing so fast. But you, in a lot of ways, got a lot of traction at the beginning, and I did as well, through e-learning, right? We didn't call it that, but we had websites where we taught people how to do things, and I think that's really where things are going more and more. what? But if you're a kid today and you go on the internet and you ask Google something, it's just spitting back a bunch of crap. How do you make sure that your kids or the people you're coaching, your athletes, are finding the right information? Or is there a way that you could tell that something's wrong?
Well, what I think is interesting is, and we definitely have experienced, and we've owned a gym now 12 years, and we have definitely experienced the flavor du jour. People are excited about new thing and trying the new thing, and and some of that is just being human and being curious. But one of the things that you do as a coach is, and even through these podcasts kind of projects, e-learning, is that you're curating a bunch of information. Like I'm a huge John Berardi fan, and Precision Nutrition, and just so reasonable. Yeah. And so when people have a question for me, I'm like, I trust that guy.
Right.
And I also work with him, right? Yeah. So I've seen him work. I know he's vetted, and then I don't have to worry about that and there are so many good people thinking about nutrition, but that one is really a reasonable, the thing. And I think that's one of the ways we have forgotten that. In our evolution, we're supposed to be about a small group of 50 people, upward to 150 people. Right. We can, in that group, can really winnow out a bunch of BS. And I think this is what's important, is that, yes, there is a bunch, Facebook lies to us, and there's a bunch of fad BS out there, right? Sure. This juice cleanse, this secret program. But I think one of the things that we forget is that people are really clever, and they will figure out if something is BS or not pretty quickly. I mean, I probably did buy some ab thing on the TV late at night when I was 17, but that's because I didn't know better. But, now I think one of the things that I think, for example, physical therapy does poorly is we don't trust people to figure out what's going to work for them, whether it's placebo or not. But most of the time, if you can snatch more, overhead squat more, or you run faster, unlikely it's a placebo. You know what I mean? If I improved your mechanics, I improved your efficiency. And I think sometimes one of the things that we have not done a good job of is trusting people to know what works. And without bookmarking that and saying, hey, look, don't skitter around to the program of the week, but when people come in there and say, hey, I think I need to get stronger. I'm like, well, are you making progress doing what you're doing? Well, stop, quit jumping. It's working. And when it stops working, we have the next conversation. The key here is to look at your community of practice, and and if your community counts macros and it works for everyone, then that's going to be an easy way to manage that. If you're in a hardcore paleo community and that works for you, I think the bottom line is that we can trust the people around us, and we should be curating that for our kids for sure. And we just put on Twitter today an article written by one of our staff members about the need for simplicity, and how as he has trained longer and longer, he has gotten back to simple. And it starts with, even if we're talking about fat burning or being leaner, I asked people, did you eat 6 fistfuls of vegetables today?
Yeah.
I'm like, then whatever you're talking about is what we call bullshit.
Right.
It's just nothing. Like you're not even a human being yet. So let's do first things first, and then we can talk about dialing up and dialing down and this fat and that fat, right? I mean, I think first things first. Show me you can front squat. Then we can have a conversation about your elite, program. But you got to show me you can front squat first.
I love that. I love it. Well, we're coming up on time, but before we go, could you tell folks what you're working on now, Kelly, and also what's coming up soon? Where they can find you as well. We
there's a couple things we've done. We're at MobilityWOD, WOD, Mobility Workout of the Day. And a couple months ago, we switched to a follow-along format on the daily programming. So we've been doing daily programming for years. Yeah. But now we have a follow-along format, because what people realize is that we realized that we were missing a lot of nuance. People were, and now we force people to play along. So it's like a guided yoga session, but around improving your mechanics, and that has been tremendous. So I think it's like $10 a month, and we make a daily 16 to 20 minute video for you to follow along. So it's coaching around improving positions and tissue health.
Very.
So I think that's pretty rad. We have a level 2 course. We've switched our level 1 course online, and our level 2 course is coming out in December. And one of the things that we're trying to do is trying to put the coach into the driver's seat of being able to identify mechanical restriction and understanding the components of that mechanical restriction. So if someone squats and their feet turn out and their knees dump in backgrounds, it's not like, hey, well, that's just do a lot more squats and wait till someone breaks. Now we can become curious and say, oh, look, you don't have any dorsiflexion. Here's how we're going to fix that. Cool. We're teaching blood flow restriction. We're teaching tooling. We're teaching more advanced voodoo floss techniques. And what we think is the coach is really going to be the person who can, again, tightly conjoin. I see someone move. They have a problem. I can fix it. Because what's happening right now is that, let's say you went for a run and your knee hurts. Are you injured? No, your knee just hurts after a run for whatever reason. You just flew from the East Coast. You're stiff. Whatever. You tweak. Right. It doesn't. Your running technique's not perfect. And what's not happening is people are not taking that immediately to their doctor or their physical therapist, the chiro. Maybe some people are, but most of us are not. We're just kind of hoping it goes away. Yeah. What we want to do is give the coaches a way of being able to say, okay, let's start. Is it tight quads? Are you missing terminal knee extension? Is it your dorsiflexion? So we can become curious about solving these incident level problems.
Yeah.
So that's launching. And then we have a couple new books out that are coming out next year. One is about paddling. Cool. Called Waterman 2.0, which I'm really excited about. And then we also have another book called Flight Plan, which is about how to survive airplane travel, which we're also very excited about.
Oh, what? I can't wait for that one, man.
Yeah, I think that one's going to change because, again, what we keep trying to do is saying, hey, here's what we've learned in our elite Formula One experience. Yeah. Here's how it actually matters to all of us who suffer. So, right. So anyway, we got a lot of fun things happening, and I'm really there was a time where I was a little concerned about where strength and conditioning was going because on Instagram it looks like it's Olympic lifting and gluten-free vodka and hamburgers without buns
and butts, yeah,
and lots of butts. But I'm seeing a great sophistication across the board. People are so much more sophisticated, and we really feel excited about being able to meet them on that sophistication.
Right.
When we started teaching 10 years ago on our course. I'd be like, this is your leg. And people were like, this is amazing. I have a leg. I PR, and I'm like, okay, it's really bad. But now people are much more sophisticated, and we're seeing that the techniques and tools understanding are ubiquitous, which means we're moving the ball. It means we get to have the next conversation.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you're out there listening right now and you want to know who I trust with movement and performance, it's Kelly Starrett. So check out his books. Check out MobilityWOD as well. You do fantastic work. I really appreciate it. And actually, I've got a yoga tune-up ball right here that I've been rolling around on this whole time too. So
that's what's up. I love it.
Right on, man.
What we want to do, and here's the last idea, is I want to we want to streamline practice so that you can get back into play and downtime, that you should be able to, hang out and not fill every nook and cranny of your day with trying to optimize. That's the wrong thinking. Do the time, and while you're working, you can fix a lot of problems, and then get home and be off the hook. That's the goal.
Totally. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is fantastic, and I'd love to have you on again soon.
Thanks for letting me rant.
Thanks again for listening to Fat Burning Man. Don't forget, before you go, check out fatburningtribe.com. If you have a question for me that you want answered about how to improve your performance, what to eat for dinner, how to drop fat quickly, how to improve your overall health, or anything else, we answer all of your questions there. So quickly, you can get the first month for just $1 for a limited time. Check it out at fatburningtribe.com. All right, I'll see you there. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Fat Burning Man. If you liked it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, the podcast app, or wherever else you might be listening to or watching this show. Got a second? Please leave me a quick review on iTunes. I always love hearing from you, and if you think someone else might like and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or with a family member. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at FatBurnMan and Facebook by typing in Abel James or Fat Burning Man. Drop me a line anytime. Did you know that I've recorded over 150 episodes of Fat Burning Man, winning 4 awards in independent media and hitting #1 in more than 8 countries? And here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode for free. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. I'll give you a second to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes in video and audio versions for all the past episodes of Fat Burning Man. Better yet, Enter your best email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide to start burning fat right now and a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now, enter your best email to get your free fat burning download straight to your inbox, and make sure that you never miss a show again. This is Abel James signing off. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week.